St. Stephen, St. Bede, to this, our first Monday evening in our Lenten series. We're so very, very pleased to have you with us and to have both us, Jamie and Steve, with us tonight. You probably know this one.
Holy, holy, holy Lord, God of power and might, heaven and earth of your glory are full. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Holy, holy, holy Lord, God of power and might, heaven and earth of your glory are full. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Holy, holy, holy Lord, God of power and might, heaven and earth of your glory are full. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the high. Hosanna, 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 Hosanna in the highest.
Steve and Jamie have enjoyed a 25-year friendship and creative partnership. By Jamie's count, together they have consumed a small lake of coffee and a duck pond full of good beer. Please welcome Jamie Howison and Steve Bell.
At least a duck pond.
At least a duck pond.
I'll teach a song quickly. This is from, since it's on Psalms, I'll teach you a psalm song. And it's very simple, just one verse, Psalm 70, verse 1. And it's just kind of, are you guys familiar at all with the Teze tradition? Music, you kind of take one line and you just kind of write a simple melody to it and you just kind of sing it over and over again for 3 or 4 hours. It's lovely, it's a good tradition. And the idea of it is that it's not that you couldn't maybe have a second verse or other thoughts, but sometimes something is just worth soaking in, right? So that's kind of the idea of it, is to kind of soak in a thought or an ambience of thought. So this is very simple. It goes, come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue. That's it. Come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue again. Come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue. Take it up. Come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue. Take it down. Come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God, Lord, hurry to my rescue. Okay, we're going to do it again, but I want to just, Jamie, kind of the book there, I just want to read you. St. John Cassian wrote about this. He said this one prayer from Psalm 70, he says it pretty much is all you need. And so I just wanted to read, because he writes, so this is he lived from 360 to 425. He instructed his followers that this one little verse contained all that was needed for the fullness of prayer. Praying this first verse was sufficient to ward off all worldly disturbances. That's a lot of power. And the turbulence of sin. So it's enough to ward off all worldly disturbances and the turbulence of sin until the union of the Father and of the Son and of the Spirit fill our senses and our minds. In recalling the words of his elder brother Isaac, who encouraged continuous repetition of this one verse, Cassian's writings reveal how the earliest monastics used a simple device to learn how to pray unceasingly. So just repeat it over and over and over again. There's a little twist in here, though. The elder monk warned, however, spiritual danger lays not only in times of distress, right, and temptation, but equally in seasons of joy and good fortune. So this is not to be sung just when you're stressed. That at all times of life you're vulnerable, right? Even the joyous times, right? And so when I wrote the piece of music, you'll notice that the first come we sing it in a minor key. Come to my help, oh God. So that's more the I need help. And then I flipped it into the major key. Come to my help, oh God. There's a bright countenance to it, right? So it's a very different from the minor come to my help. Come to my help, and so it's for both. And there's a way that when you add melody to a text like this, you can actually emotionally turn the meaning of it for different seasons. So it just kind of works that well. So we'll just do it again. A few times in the minor, and then a few times in the major. Then we'll take up another higher key so it elevates a little bit more. It'll come right back down to the minor, and will leave you all very distressed and depressed. Okay. Come to my help, O God. Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God. Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God. Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God. Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God. Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God. Lord, hurry to my rescue. Take it up again. Come to my help, O God. Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God. Lord, hurry to my rescue. Come to my help, O God. Lord, hurry to my rescue. Simple, eh? But it kind of gets you there, right?
So it's good to be back. Always good to be back in this building with this community. We have got, I understand, until 8 o'clock when we all have to adjourn and eat sweet things in the parish hall. And during that time, we're going to try to unpack a little bit about this project, this book that we have written together, and some of the music that it's matched with. We won't talk too much. I'll read one of the reflections, and Steve will play the song. We want to make sure, though, that there's plenty of time to engage, your questions or observations or comments, or like if there's a particular song that we should sing, we can do that too. So it will be fun. In the little potted obituary that I sent to Gord, talked about the fact that I was ordained in this diocese in 1987. I was deaconed in 87 and priested in 88. That now makes me the longest serving active priest in the diocese. Like, I am now the senior priest.
Really?
Active.
Yeah.
In terms of somebody in stipendiary ministry and, still in active ministry, I got the longest haul in this diocese, which is so funny. Because forever and ever, I was the kid. And then it all changed. In fact, when I came here in 98, I had worked at Marymount and at St. John's College, but this was actually my first parish. And so, when I look back on those days or sit in this place, I just recognize the ways in which I was shaped and formed and how much I learned here. I learned a lot about Lutherans who I'd never heard of before. Well, but just in terms of ministry, there's this extraordinary kind of a learning curve that you get on, and this community of people that kind of gathered around and were part of that. So thank you for that, and again, it's good to be home. This project, I Will Not Be Shaken, the Songwriter's Journey Through the Psalms book with the CD, which are all of the psalm-based songs that Steve has written and recorded over the years, and which are kind of the basis of the reflections in this book. As was mentioned, it was actually kind of planted while I was here. Some of you may remember the winter, it was the winter of 2004, that I took this kind of study leave. It was about 3 weeks. I went to New York City, and I went and saw Robert Capon on Shelter Island, and I came back talking about him endlessly in sermons. I still do.
Yeah, he did.
And I went to Oakville for the first meetings of the Primates Theological Commission, and then I went to Saskatoon. I mean, what a tour, eh? New York City, Oakville, Ontario, Saskatoon. Some people would do it in the opposite direction, but I went to Saskatoon because the College of Emmanuel in St. Chad, which was, well, still is the Anglican theological training place on that campus, had invited me to come and kind of spend a week as pastor or priest in residence, which meant I preached a few times and led morning prayer and attended some classes and was just available as a resource for the students. And otherwise I could do whatever I wanted, which basically meant I settled myself in the common room and I worked on the very first drafts of this material, because it was about a month before that Steve has said, I have this great idea. We should do this book, and you could write kind of pastoral theological reflections on all of these psalms and songs, and then he would write kind of the background writer's notes on each song, like where it came from, and then we would include the song lyrics and a psalm translation. That's amazing, I thought. In fact, the first time I told anybody about this, some of you maybe been sitting at that table while Sheila was, the Wednesday morning communion service would have a Bible study, and then we'd go to Carmelo's restaurant at the St. James Hotel for lunch. There was always about a dozen of us. And I'm at that table and I said, guess what? I'm going to write a book with Steve. I was just like so excited. So off I went, I wrote all this stuff, and I came back with all these drafts, and I handed it to Steve, and he kind of went, whoa.
It's like a month later. I was thinking it was going to be like a 5-year project, you know, so.
So, I mean, so you're part of that, that story as well. For all kinds of reasons, the timing wasn't quite right. The music industry was shortly going through some real tumult.
Yeah.
Steve was actually kind of working through some of his own songwriting and writer's block stuff and trying to figure out how to do prose, all kinds of things. And we just kept saying, not now, not now, not now. And then about a year ago, he said, now. And I said, really?
Well, actually, what had happened was I was sitting at my desk, and I was cleaning up. Like about once a year, I clean up my desk and find all these treasures. And I had the manuscript that Jamie had written pretty much 10 years before.
Yeah.
Was there in a manila thing, and I sort of pulled it out. And I thought, oh yeah. And I started reading, going, oh, this is good. And then just realized that the timing was right for me, actually, in my business. That there was a season that we could sort of invest in these kind of purchases aren't really money makers, so you kind of have to do them at a time when you can afford to put out that energy for something that's not going to bring back cash. And those, when it's your business, but last year was the right time to do it, and so we did the work and got it done. Did
some rewrites and edits and really good editing coming from your folks, and this young staff member at Signpost who just organized the heck out of us, and so we couldn't not do it. And so down it came. Essentially, what it is taking all of the songs based on psalms that Steve has recorded from the very first album, the Comfort My People in 1989, through to one that was written specifically for this project that you just learned. And I took both the song but also the psalm that it was based on, and I thought about it pastorally and theologically. And sometimes the focus was very much on the song and kind of my engagement. And there's pieces in it where I talk about sitting in the Salisbury House in the North End, way back when, and talking through the meaning of that particular psalm text that gave rise to that particular song. And other times, as in the case of the one that I'll read you tonight, it's really the mood of the psalm I had in view. And as I was writing them, I just decided, okay, like both and we can work with this, because the songs often came out in unpredictable ways, sometimes right out of experiences, and sometimes just the text just started to sing.
Well, it's an interesting thing with working with psalms for texts for songs, right? And usually what happens for me, the process is basically usually I'll be reading a psalm for no particular reason, but all of a sudden there'll be a line or something, just a constellation of words which will just almost start glowing at me, and I realize it's connecting to something in my life that is profound or disturbing or joyful or frightening or confusing. And usually melody starts forming very, very quickly. And then these lyrics start coming out that kind of half use the psalm text and half, I kind of change them to suit my experience. So I'm not actually trying to, in most of these things, do a strict rendering of the psalm. And we've talked about this, I thought, am I okay sort of monkeying with God's word here? Is that okay? And I come from Baptist stock. Baptists do not do this, right? You don't touch the Holy Writ, but there was something about it to me that I just sort of, for one, I think I intuit as an artist that these actually, before their scripture, their poetry, their art. That's what they are first. That's how they came across. It's just devotional poetry. And artists are always riffing off of other artists, all the time. I've got a friend of mine in England who writes poetry, and I'm always taking just snatches of his poetry and attaching it to my life and redoing and creating other whole new things out of it. But his approach to life and his way of speaking about it has a way of tapping into mine and giving my unspoken feelings a home. And then all of a sudden I attach music, a few other things, and it comes. So I've done this with the Psalms, and I've been fairly free with them. So I always say they're adapted from, right? But then it begs the question, so what's the story that got you there, right? And here's the thing, if you're going to do the same thing, you'd write a different song because you don't have my story, right? But you can observe my process, and that kind of might tweak your imagination. What would you do with that song? Is there anything in there for you? You take it to another point. And I really think these texts are living. They're evergreen. And again, I was brought up that the scriptures were static, right? Absolutely static. And there may be some things that ought to be static, but in general, especially the poetry of the Bible, it's evergreen. Right? It's always meant to bring out newness. Always, always, always. Every generation, every individual is going to read something new into it. There's absolutely no way there could ever be an authoritative interpretation, because that's actually not what they're for. Right?
So one of the questions that comes up is, what are these psalms, and how do we apprehend them or engage them the way that Steve's talking? One of the beauties of the Revised Common Lectionary is that it takes us into a psalm every Sunday. One of the drawbacks of the Revised Common Lectionary is that it takes us into a psalm every Sunday, right? Because it's so easy. You just sort of imagine yourself on a Sunday morning, and somebody stands up and they read the Old Testament, and it's something from Hezekiah, and it's weird. And then they say, now we'll read Psalm, whatever it is, 86 verses 8 through 16. We'll read responsibly by whole verse. And so we do that. and then somebody stands up and reads something from Romans, and it's, you find yourself drifting, and then the gospel, and thank goodness it's a story. And then the preacher stands up and preaches, and at the end of the sermon, if you were asked, okay, tell me what the readings were. You would remember, there was that story about Jesus doing this, or maybe it was a story about David or something. Chances are the psalm would have just gone. And so part of this project is to say, oh yeah, but maybe sit with them differently, and attend to them differently, because they're actually our mother tongue, inherited from the Jewish tradition. But the Psalms are our mother tongue. They're our language. And they are, Walter Brueggemann talks about there being sort of three broad categories of Psalms. Psalms of what he calls safe orientation. The ones that, all is well, praise God, it's all good. And then there's the Psalms of what he calls painful disorientation. And those are the ones that often get kind of weird, and they can be nasty and vengeful, and the person is crying out against their enemies and saying, oh Lord, kick their teeth in, kind of stuff. And there's Psalms that pray like that. And then there are Psalms of what he calls surprising reorientation. You come back home. Psalm 23 may be one of those. Because, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me, my Lord and my guide. And you've set a table in the presence of my enemies. So this is a writer who knows bad stuff, and yet expresses trust. And so the Psalms are kind of come from for all seasons. Those times where all is good, those times where it is really bad, and so bad that you might want God to kick your enemy in the head. And be honest, there are times when somebody has done something to you that is so offensive, you'd really love God to kind of at least give them a good tweak in the back of the head. And then there are Psalms that express that surprising, oh, but I'm home. I'm being brought home. And we need to have all of those vocabularies in our faith language. Otherwise, when stuff goes bad, we're stuck. We can't say anything. So when I was on Shelter Island in 2004, talking with Robert Capon, with all this stuff just beginning to percolate in my head, I asked him his sort of take on the Psalms. He had spent that year, the year of his 77th birthday, facing all kinds of really serious and discouraging health issues. In fact, this is a man who's kind of, in some circles, is best known as a food guy. He was a food writer for a New York newspaper. Wrote a great, crazy meditation cookbook thing called The Supper of the Lamb. And because of this health concern, he'd lost his taste buds. I mean, that's just like devastating, right? And he was feeling old for the first time in his life. So I said, so talk to me about the Psalms. And he said, I've read the Psalms like mad over the years. Now, Capon was an Anglican priest, right, an Episcopalian. And he prayed very faithfully morning and evening prayer every day on his own. So every day, Psalm, morning and evening. So I've read the Psalms like mad over the years. And I've had all the reactions everyone has had. Glorious, problematic, difficult, nasty, snotty, vengeful, just weird, and also totally applicable to me at this point. Forsake me not in my old age, O Lord. And suddenly the mother tongue was there, and that's part of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say anything before we go to Psalm 13?
No, that's good. That's very good.
So this is the meditation on Psalm 13. I will read it to you in its entirety. It's not too long. Steve will play the song and tell you the backstory, and then we'll chat. The song is Psalm 13, How Long? Some of you may know it if you know Steve's material. So I write, picture, if you will, an evening at church. As I sit in those few quiet moments before people begin to arrive for worship, I find myself in deep and wordless prayer, aware that I am weary and carrying heavy burdens. No one thing in particular is weighing on me, just a combination of the stuff of ministry, family, relationship, and life. I'm all set to preach on the Lutheran Beatitudes, in which Jesus proclaims blessing upon people who, for reasons of poverty or hunger or sorrow or rejection, know that they live in need. Blessed are you when you've bottomed out, such that you can no longer kid yourself into believing that you're a self-sufficient, self-providing master of your own life. That's at least part of what's going on in those odd blessings and corresponding woes. It's great news, of course, to discover that you don't have to be, in fact, can't be that strong. Because grace is sufficiently, abundantly, and freely given by a wildly indiscriminate and loving God. As people begin to arrive, I break my stillness and go to offer greetings. One person after another has stories to tell about weariness and burdens too heavy to bear. You know how I've said before that we've had the week from hell? One woman asks me. Well, this was the week from hell. As worship begins, I'm aware how Jesus' blessing of those who weep is particularly potent and immediate for us, for me, this night. But then another voice begins to ring from deep within my imagination. How long? I mean, really, Lord, I think we get it here. The woman agonizing over her teenage son, the family wrestling against terminal cancer, the person in deep conflict with a roommate, the wife whose marriage has just been punctuated by a big question mark. Surely all of us could stand to have a shot at grace without first having to face these tears. Then from Psalm 13, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? How about a direct, miraculous intervention here, Lord? Maybe just this once you could change the heart of the teenager, zap the cancer, make the roommate more reasonable and the marriage partner easier to love. Maybe this time your blessed grace could be a bit more aggressive. We know our need already. These psalms are the voices of those who find their circumstances dangerously and not just inconveniently changed, and they do not like it. That's a quote from Walter Brueggemann. The psalmist dislikes this dangerous dislocation at least as much as I do, or anyone else in our hurting congregation for that matter. The psalmist even tries to leverage God with a bit of shame-based pressure, crying for divine intervention. Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death, and my enemy will say, I have prevailed. My foes will rejoice because I am shaken. After all, what kind of God would allow this to happen to one of the faithful? Yet, as Walter Brueggemann points out, it's the function of these songs to enable, require, and legitimate the complete rejection of the old, safe orientation. The old arrangement is seen, if not as fraud, at least as inadequate to the new circumstance. So yes, the quick fix zapping would be nice, but it would not do a whole lot to deepen us into the reality of the changed circumstance. It would not do a whole lot to grow a people who can actually take on new life. Costly grace was Bonhoeffer's paradoxical phrase, which in this instance seems to have something to do with the formation of a people who manage to keep moving deeper and deeper into the gift, regardless of the cost. The psalmist manages to resolve this lament by affirming that, just as trust has been offered before, so will rejoicing come again. I will sing to the Lord. which means I will rejoice again, because God has dealt bountifully with me. So again, some lines from Psalm 13. But I trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me. These verses offer memory and stubborn resolution in one movement, and as such are a profoundly hopeful and faithful proclamation. Yet, how long is not a question far from the psalmist's mind. Neither is it far from my mind. Not today, not ever.
As he's reading it, okay, the song I wrote for this psalm was 20 years ago or more. So, and I realized I would probably write a different thing today, right? This is a younger man's angst in this, but I remember it very well. But I've just been recently diagnosed with sort of burnout, and I'm sort of needing to do some work right now in my life because I'm a little bit on the fried side, and I'm kind of feeling this a little bit in a different way than I did back in the day, right? So it's interesting. I wonder what I'd write today if I was starting, and probably be different, but that's okay. Let me just talk before I sing this song what was behind it for me when I wrote it. My father, I was brought up in a Christian family with great legacy. My grandfather and my grandmother were missionaries in China for 30 years. My grandmother had 10 children in the hills of Tibet. The stories that I grew up with were unbelievable, of just heroic faith, adventure, all that, like everything for that missionary era. And my grandparents were just fantastic people. My grandfather was a great storyteller. Right, and so I just grew up with this sort of I was inheriting, and then all my uncles and aunts are wonderful, wonderful people, missionaries, pastors. My father is a brilliant pastor. My sister ended up becoming a missionary in her life, and I realized at one point I was surrounded by all these wonderful, wonderful people. And I just sort of felt like I was like a black spot in the family. Like literally. And I remember, because I grew up, in a Baptist evangelical home, and there's this great stress on personal relationship with Jesus and holiness in your living and all that kind of stuff. And none of that stuff really connected all that deeply to me. I could never kind of wrap my brain around some of the ways other people were expressing their faith. It just didn't connect with me. And I always thought there was something wrong with me. Right? Like I accepted Jesus in my heart at DVBS when I was 9 years old, so I knew I was saved. And what that meant was when I got to heaven, God was going to look at me and dismiss me, but I was going to be able to bring out this piece of paper saying, no, we signed this, you have to let me in. And he's going to say, give me that. He's going to look at it, and he's going to remind Peter that he has to pay more attention when he signs these things, because I shouldn't really get in, because I'm really not what I ought to be. I mean, I honestly had that feeling. I had these dreams when I was a kid. Do you remember these things that are called chick tracts? Does anybody remember chick tracts?
I do.
They were cartoons. They were like little pamphlets in cartoon form that you'd give to your friends that were supposed to scare the hell out of them. They were these little stories of people that refused to believe in Jesus and went to hell, and you see them burning and all this kind of stuff. And there's this one chick tract that came out about this one guy who had accepted Jesus in his life but hadn't really led a very good life. And so he ended up going to heaven, but he spent the rest of eternity with his feet burning, with his toes kind of smoking. And I remember reading this with horror, thinking, that's me. I'm going to get there. I'm going to have to sit at the back. Everybody's going to know my feet are burning. And I'm just going to... And so that was... I had this horrible... I grew up with this stuff, right? So anyways, when I got out of high school, there was something in me that so desperately wanted to feel a very deep connection to God. I did have a lively faith, but just felt like there's something that was unfree about it, and I didn't have the testimony that my father had, or my grandparents, or my uncles, or my aunts, or my sisters had. They just had these glorious things, and I just didn't know. I was just kind of this loser guy, and I remember praying, how long? Like when do I get the thing, the zap, the experience that's going to make me like all my heroes, right? And it didn't come. And right around then, the charismatic renewal started in Winnipeg. I don't know if you guys remember. It started actually a lot in the basement of Lutheran churches. and Catholic churches. It was all nobody lit it up in the main sanctuary. So it was all a basement movement. And all these people were having these powerful experiences of the Holy Spirit, and people were speaking in tongues, and there was miracles, and there was slain in the Spirit, and there was all these, and I started going to all these things looking to get zapped. Right? What is it going to take to make me one of them? Like, what's the thing? And of course, it never happened for me. Everybody else would have these experiences. I never did. You know, I'd always go home feeling depressed and feeling abandoned and kind of going, well, how long? And then I think, well, there's got to be something fundamentally wrong with me. And I started going through all my sins and tried to repent as deeply as I could. I started confessing things I wouldn't even consider doing. Like, it's what is keeping you from me or me from you? What's going on? I could never figure it out. And nothing changed for me ever. And I stopped praying after a while. And I sort of thought, well, I guess this is my lot, right? God's not fond of me like he would be of others, apparently. And it's who I am, and I'll just have to live with it. And of course, when you put that kind of stuff down and you submerge it, it starts to pop up in other ways, like depression, anxiety, all those kinds of things. And I found myself in not a very good state. And to make a longer story short, I remember sitting in a prayer service one time. It was at Youth for Christ, and John Courtney, the leader of Youth for Christ at the time, still is, did a thing on Psalm 13. And it was, how long have you forgotten me, Lord? Is this going to go on forever? Like, I'm hurting down here. And you apparently said, and I read this thing, and I realized that this was a complaint to God about God. Right? Somebody was actually saying, you're the one not doing the right thing. I've done everything I can here. So what? What's the deal, right? And I remember reading that, and I was in shock. I think, you can pray that? Like, that's okay? And this person is clearly profoundly disappointed with God, and feels they're wasting away unless God somehow comes up with his end of the bargain. And I just remember being so knocked out, like that, you can pray that. And I was lying in my bed that night, and it wouldn't go away, this feeling, and I started to realize I was profoundly disappointed in God. And I was profoundly angry. And wondering if I could say it. And I remember thinking, I got nothing to lose, and all those feelings and all those emotions and all those years and all that disappointment and all that sadness and all that alienation sort of came up as this one big expression in tears and kind of fist up in the air saying, what the hell? That was exactly the emotion, that I couldn't get past. And I remember basically crying myself to sleep, thinking that God was going to come and take my life in the night for what I've just done. And I woke up the next morning, and the sun was streaming through my window, and literally like a Disney movie, there was a bird on the windowsill tweeting away. And it was a glorious morning, and I had given God my worst feelings and everything, and apparently everything was still fine. And I don't want to say God spoke to me because but I felt in my heart God said, now we're talking. You always give me your wishes. A wish is air. I can't mold air, but this is you, and I can fashion that. Now we're talking. And I really think that this was the beginning of, this is the beginning of my adult prayer life. Was this particular engagement with the psalm. And it comes out kind of bluesy, as it should. So.
How long have you forgotten me, oh Lord? How long? Will you hide your face from me? How long? Look on me, answer my call. Oh Lord my God, I need some light before I fall. How long will I wrestle with my thoughts? How long Must I have sorrow in my heart? How long? Look on me, answer my call. I cry every night, but you don't seem to hear at all. Yet I'll trust in your love. Yes, your unfailing love. And I will sing of my days that you've been good to me. Yes, you've been good to me. Yet I'll trust in your love. Yes, your unfailing love. And I will sing of my days that you've been good to me. Yes, you've been good to me. But how long have you forgotten me, oh Lord? How long? Will you hide your face from me? How long? How long? How long? How long?
It's a great tune. I remember you sitting in my office at Marymount and playing that for Larry and me.
Oh.
Right after it was written.
Oh, really?
Yep. We just thought it was amazing. It is. We've been really long-winded. We have not left nearly enough breathing space for you. But questions or comments or observations or...
The book and the CD kind of run that format. Each chapter is sort of taking one of the songs. Jamie talks about it, I talk about what's behind it, and then you can listen to the thing. So it's kind of a nice way to kind of go through some of the songs. I think there's 17
Yeah.
in there.
Yes.
Did you write that in a Chicago blues bar?
No, you know, and I'm not a blues guy. I'm not a blues guy, so I thought it was like, you know, there's only about 2 songs in my whole repertoire that even slightly get bluesy, and that one just came out the way it did. And every time I play it now, I just think it's such an odd song, because you're not, well, only because you won't find songs stylistically like that in my repertoire. I mean, little hints here and there, but
Nice surprise.
it's the way it came out. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Are you working on something now? On a song that's speaking to you these days?
You know what? I didn't bring it. Yeah. I don't think I have it in here. No, I just wrote one a couple weeks ago. Wait alone in stillness, O my soul. Right. So I this whole idea of sort of waiting, and it's almost in a sense like how long? In a sense that it's probably a more mature version of it. I think this one is like, I'm in agony, get me out of it. The one I'm writing right now, and I can't even think of, boy, I wish I would have thought of this ahead of time because I should have brought it. It's brand new. I could have sung it for you. I don't have it with me. But it's I think it's more of a more mature version of the same thing, where there's something okay about the waiting, whereas this one it was not okay. Like, I get me out of here. Like, send a helicopter, like whatever. I think for me right now, where I'm at in a different stage of life, that there's some mystery in the waiting on God that you don't want to necessarily rush out of. As uncomfortable and just diseased as you feel, that there's some mystery about just doing that well. And that's what that song is about. I wish I had. No, I don't.
It's kind of like hitting the point in your life where you realize that Advent sings with a sort of a deeper resonance than Christmas.
Yeah.
You know, like as a kid and a young adult, and even when my kids were young, it was kind of Christmas was just so brilliant. Yeah. And then I've since realized I love Advent far more.
Yeah.
And it's that move, right?
Yeah,
it's being at home with the waiting.
The agony can be a beautiful thing, you know.
The longing.
The longing, yeah, the holy longing. Ronald Rolheiser wrote a book called Holy Longing that everybody, I think, should read about 30 times. I just think it's a brilliant book, but it kind of talks about that.
Do you have a favorite song?
Probably the 23rd. I wrote that years ago. I mean, that one or Psalm 19. Those are probably my favorites. Sure. Would you like the 23rd Psalm or Psalm 19?
Let's see by a show of hands. The 23rd Psalm? Psalm 19.
Ah, okay.
I think the 23rd wins.
23rd. Hey, this is the other slightly blues one. This is that's interesting, right? You know. Okay, so okay. You know, the quick story of this one. I was feeling melancholic and fiddling around on my guitar, and this melody came out, this little guitar bluesy riff, and I remember I was sitting in the living room and my wife comes by and she says, "Boy, that's different for you. What's it about?" And I didn't know. I had no idea. And so the melody stuck around for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and every time I sat down, I couldn't think of what it was about. Is it a love song? Is it a word? Like, I didn't know what it was. And then one night I'm lying in bed and I'm half asleep, and Nancy's asleep beside me, and I literally sat up in bed, bolt upright, and I said, "Psalm 23." And it was just like, it almost came out without me, and she startled, she goes, what are you Psalm 23? And I said, "That song I'm writing." And I said, "It's Psalm 23. And she goes, "It'll never work." And then she turned over and went to sleep. And I just fell back asleep again. And then the next morning, I woke up, and I couldn't remember if that had actually happened, or if I had dreamt it. Like, it was because it was right in that middle of both worlds. And so I snuck downstairs, and I got out my Bibles, and quickly it just lined up. And the song was written in about 20 minutes. And Nancy comes down the stairs and hears Holy Steve going, "Na na 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 na." so
The Lord of life is my shepherd. He leads me with nothing to want, and He leads me along with His staff and His rod. He is here to comfort my fears. Though I walk through the valley, I walk with His hand in mine. I thought I passed my last breath in the shadows of death, but I'm still here, safe on the other side. Here with the waters beside, cool in the grasses I lie. Here with my Lord, who gently restores. He's the shepherd of life. There's a table laid out before me. There's a cup in which joy overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all of the days grasses I lie, here with my Lord, who gently restores and leads me back here with the waters beside. Cool in the grasses I lie, here with my Lord. Here with my Lord, who gently restores. He is the shepherd of life.
I think we're officially after 8 o'clock. That's okay. That's okay.
We're officially after 8, but I'm sure if people have some more questions or maybe want to hear some more music, I'm sure people will stick around. I don't think that's an issue, but I will just sort of make a couple of closing remarks. First of all, as you know, Jamie, singing and teaching has always been a very important part of this congregation of St. Stephen and St. Bede. So it's really apropos that the two of you are here together to uplift things that are very important in our spiritual life and in our journey. And one of the things that you said right at the opening really struck me with, going through the readings and whoever remembers the psalm? Like, you never remember the psalm.
So
and
you
yet,
sing it.
So you sing it, yeah.
Right, but also, what do you turn to in times of grief and sorrow, in times of joy and happiness and in comfort? You go to the Psalms because there's a psalm for all seasons. And then when you sing a psalm and have that emotion to it, it just resonates in your soul and in your heart. And I think we heard that tonight through your readings and through the psalms that you have sung for us this evening. So just a wonderful, wonderful evening, and we very much appreciate that you come and share this time with us and continue the teaching and the singing, which we love so much, and to have such two brilliant gentlemen before us. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
You're very welcome.
I did bring along a little box with the books and CDs, so if people are interested, if we run out, we can get more here. It's not that far. But they are here, so I've got them on a little table outside of the door. We had some sort of thought, if we can indulge you in this, that we should close by singing a song that my memory says we sang it here, God Our Protector.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do it. That's a psalm song from the book.
So it's is it 84?
I think so.
Do it lower. Okay, this is very simple. If you don't know it, you'll catch on.
God our protector, keep us in mind, always give strength to your people, for if we could be with you one day in time, it is better than 1,000 without you. God our protector, keep us in mind, always give strength to your people, for if we could be with you one day in time, it is better than 1,000 without you. It is better than 1,000 without you. Oh, 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 without you.
Thank you so much. It's a nice way to spend an evening. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it very much.